In a split second, it turned around and looked at me. I felt a chill run down my spine, and all my hair stood up as I realized that this creature was not something from nature. Warning: viewer discretion is advised. The following content contains gory and violent narration that may not be suitable for all audiences. This warning is intended to ensure the safety and well-being of our viewers. It was a hot summer day in 1984, and my friends and I decided to go exploring the caves of the nearby forest. I was with my two closest friends. Let's call them Mike and Tim, and another friend of ours. We'll call her Jessica. We had all grown up in this small town in West Virginia and had always been curious about the caves. We packed some food, water, and flashlights and set off on the hike to the caves. On the way, we encountered this kind old lady walking on the path. After we told her of our adventure, she even told us some shortcuts to get faster to the caves. After a small talk, she wished us a safe trip. We said goodbye and went our separate ways. As we walked deeper into the forest, the trees grew denser and the air became cooler. We chatted and laughed along the way, enjoying the thrill of adventure. When we arrived at the entrance to the cave, we noticed it was unusually dark inside, and there was a faint musty odor that made my nose itch. But we shrugged it off and ventured in anyway. As we took our first steps inside, the darkness swallowed us whole. I could barely see my hand in front of my face. The musty odor grew stronger, almost suffocating. It felt like the air was thick with the stench of death. My nose twitched as I tried to ignore the overwhelming smell. As we moved further in, the ground became slippery and wet. The squishy sound of our shoes echoed through the cavern. You could barely see anything. Tim was leading the group, as always, Mr. Courage being the first in everything. Suddenly, I heard a sharp cracking sound, and Tim let out a scream. We rushed towards him, and what we saw made our stomachs churn. The ground beneath him had given way, revealing a pit filled with sharp rocks. It was about 4 feet deep, and he fell into a squatting position. His thigh was impaled on one of the jagged edges, and blood gushed out like a river. The sharp rock had perforated Tim's thigh, and in an instant, what came to my mind was prior knowledge about specific arteries in the body that, when punctured, can make you bleed out in minutes. So I think we have to do something quick to stop the bleeding, and we were searching within our backpacks to makeshift a tourniquet I learned while going through JROTC. As we struggled to help Tim, a low growl echoed through the cave, and we froze. Not even the sense of urgency from our friend bleeding could counter the sense of fear that we felt when we heard that growl. We turned to see a pair of glowing yellow eyes staring at us from the darkness. It was then that I realized it was not made up. It was not our imagination in a stressful situation, but only that we were not alone. Something was there with us, watching, waiting. We tried to huddle up on a wall next to the pit to feel the false sense of protection. We were frozen. We had to think fast and move fast. But so many things were happening at the same time. Tim was still impaled. Even if we picked him up, we had to stop the bleeding somehow. We were far from the cave entrance, and even if we made it out, we had to run quite a stretch to get back to the car. This, let's call it Ghoul, was looking at us like we were food while pacing side to side, trying to contain itself. Then Tim, in a cracked-in pain voice, yells, "Run, leave me, and get out of here." Tim, as always, "Mister, I am not scared of anything," trying to put a brave face in this moment. This triggered the demon, pouncing on us quickly and grabbing Mike and me. Jessica ran away. As she was behind us, our bodies gave her a chance to escape. I felt its claws rip and tear into the flesh and muscles of my legs. Everything happened so fast. This thing slashed us side to side as if it knew what was needed to stop us from running. The pain was excruciating, and I could feel warm blood pouring out of my wounds. I managed to pull myself from its claws, while Mike gave it a hell of a fight, but it pulled them with ease simultaneously, pulling Mike while he was fighting and tearing Tim's thigh muscles like soft clay. I watched in horror as the creature dragged my friends, Mike and Tim, away and disappeared into the darkness. To this day, I remember their screams of terror echoing through the cavern. After pulling myself away, I fell to the ground immediately and tried to keep crawling, but a sense of despair rushed over me. If I manage to make it to the entrance, I still have hours till I get anywhere, and by nighttime, this spawn from hell will go out to hunt what is left of me. As I lay there, helpless and bleeding, I knew I would die. The musty smell that tickled my nose earlier was now mixed with the metallic scent of blood. The darkness seemed to close in on me, and I knew this was the end. We were young and naive, and we thought nothing could go wrong. After all, we grew up here in this town, near this cave, and we heard some stories as children, but everybody knew they were not true, or so we thought. Suddenly, I hear some noise, and I weakly reach for my flashlight. As I shone the flashlight into the consuming darkness of the cave and in the faint lighter areas of the cave, I could see the creature. It was about 6 feet tall and had sickly pale skin like it had never seen the light of day. It seemed that it dragged my friends' bodies to a small, what can be described as a nest-looking spot nearby, and it was staring at them. In a split second, it turned around and looked at me. I felt a chill run down my spine, and all my hair stood up as I realized that this creature was not something from nature. It was pure evil incarnate, and animalistic instincts made flesh. Then it goes back to looking at the bodies of my beloved friends. It was as if it had forgotten I was there. As if it was so enticed by the flesh in front of it that it forgot that it had more victims to claim. Or maybe it knew that I could not go far after it attacked. Its eyes were a bright, piercing yellow, which seemed to glow in the darkness. The eyes that haunt me in my dreams, nightmares, rather. The creature's thin, sinewy arms and legs were covered in coarse, matted hair, and its fingers ended in razor-sharp claws. Those things could have been at least 3 inches long. Its mouth was stretched into a grotesque grin, revealing rows of jagged teeth that looked sharp enough to tear through flesh and bone. The stench emanating from this thing was so putrid I could barely stomach it. At this point, I am losing faith, and I know the thing will come after me next. From behind me, I feel some other presence and a pull that drags me away from the creature. I turned around, and it was Jessica. I murmured to her, "What are you doing here?" "Leave me and get back to the car," she almost whispered. "Shut up and help me get you out of this cave." A slight sense of hope takes over me, and I help her immediately, trying to push myself through the pain with my mangled legs. It seemed she was in some kind of shock, and her instincts just kicked in. To this day, I don't know what compelled her to return to the cave. But now, I am so grateful she did and was on the volleyball team. Jessica and I moved as fast as we could, but we could still hear its growl echoing through the cave. We didn't know what to do. We were scared. We could hear the ghouls' footsteps behind us, getting closer and closer. Finally, we made it to the cave entrance, and the sun was still setting. When we got out, we sensed something was looking at us, and this intense curiosity of "are we safe now?" took over, and we looked back. We see the most haunting image I can still see as I tell this story sitting in this chair. A faint, misshaped head in the cave shadow above the floating, shiny yellow eyes of death, and the slight shine of what seemed like 30 teeth in the darkness. It was as if it was unwilling to go out in the sun. Fear strikes again and gives us more adrenaline to keep going. We were far from the car we came in. A hike took us to that cave. We stopped for a few minutes to rest and wrap part of my shirt and part of hers around my legs to stop the bleeding. I am not in great shape, with my legs useless now and the sun setting quick. Once again, I think, what if this thing can come out of its prison at night? I started thinking of ways this could go, but the outcome was not good. We lost our flashlights in the chaos. I still have mine, but the cheap battery bought at a convenience store will not last, and the only light we will have is from the moon. It's about to be nighttime, and we were still what it looked like halfway. I tell Jessica, "You should leave me and save yourself. We don't know if this thing will get out at night." Then she replies, "We did not make it this far just to give up now." Once again, this woman gives my sorry ass a sense of hope while pulling me and getting tired by the minute. It was nightfall, and by my estimation, we were 3/4 of the way. At this time, I started to feel extremely weak, which my guess would be that the blood loss had been too much by now. Abruptly, we heard some rustling in the nearby brushes, but we were so tired that being scared was not enough to stop us. When I say stop us, I mean stop her, because I was mostly useless. We were so close, yet so far, while stumbling through the darkness with a dimmed flashlight and the moonlight. We could see the glimmer of the car at the end of the path under the moonlight. We heard another rustling of the bushes again, and Jessica looked back for a split second out of curiosity. Since we were so close, the sensation of being almost there was starting to gain on us. Within that split second, the creature launched its claws at her and scratched the side of her face and shoulder. She let out a horrifying scream as the ghoul attacked her. She was a strong girl. She kept pushing. I turned around and saw the creature for the first time up close. It was a grotesque, emaciated humanoid figure with long, sharp claws and a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth. I wanted to help Jessica, but I could barely stand. I had lost too much blood. I was so exhausted, and keeping my eyes open was getting harder and harder. The adrenaline was not enough anymore to keep me alive, and I started to feel really cold but sweaty at the same time, like chills. I was getting heavier by the minute, and Jessica was exhausted by the second. Jessica stumbled with some roots, and we both fell to the ground. She fell further in the path since I collapsed as soon as my mangled legs touched the ground, and she tried to stay standing with no luck. I would say she was about 2 feet ahead of me. At that moment, I remembered the gift my dad had given me for Christmas the year prior, a Leatherman. I think they called it the PST or something like that. It was super helpful multi-tool, and he knew I liked the outdoors, so he told me, "This will surely come in handy out there." He was always so thoughtful. I could barely move, but I pulled out that multi-tool I had in my pocket and raised the knife that came on the outside of it. The creature got closer to her on the ground, grabbed her, and started to slowly drag her first to its den, as if it knew that I wasn't going anywhere. It knew the only one capable of running was her. I could see her fighting back with all her might, her fists swinging and her feet kicking, but it was no use. The ghoul was too strong and too fast. As I watched in horror, I lifted myself like half rune-over roadkill with my weak arms and blindly launched the knife at the creature, hoping to at least slow it down. I must have hit something important, like a lung or something, because it dropped her. fell on its back, and let out a gurgling screech from hell before collapsing. I fell with it on my back and quickly tried to rest on my elbows to look at what was happening. Jessica and I were frozen momentarily, seeing this spawn of evil struggling to breathe and to take the knife out. I yelled at Jessica, "We have to get out of here." She quickly stood up and picked me up with what was left of her will to live. Finally, we made it to the car. She threw me in the back seat, my vision fading and my body growing colder by the second. She jumped in the front seat, started the car, and floored it to the nearest hospital. As I lay there dying, I couldn't help but think about Jessica and the other friends we had lost. We had been foolish to venture into those caves, and now we were paying the ultimate price. When we arrived, Jessica got out and started yelling, "Help! Help! Somebody help me, please." They came out and put me on a hospital bed. As they rolled me in, I saw an old lady beside the hospital entrance. She seemed familiar, but I was so weak I could barely tell if anything was real. She was halfway in the shadow, and her eyes looked weird, like when you shine a light on an animal's eye, it reflects back. I look at her face, from top to bottom, and as I get to her lips, I can barely make out something she is saying. I am unsure since I was damn near passing out, but I swear she said, "Thank you." But as she said it, her face suddenly transformed into what looked like my lifelong friend, Mr. Courageous, Mr. I am not scared of anything, Tim. I could not believe what my eyes were seeing and immediately passed out. We never saw the old lady again, or someone that looked like Tim. It might have been a hallucination from blood loss and stress trauma. Soon after, authorities claimed it was a bear attack. They said we were hallucinating from dehydration and blood loss. We moved out of state, and later I got married, and to this day I try to forget this ever happened. But it is kind of hard to forget when you are in a wheelchair and your hero wife has a big scar on her face. My two closest friends were gone forever, eaten by the ghoul that lurked in the caves. The ghoul had claimed its prey, and we could do nothing to stop it. I'll never forget that day, and always regret going on that ill-fated adventure. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like, subscribe, and watch while they're watching you.